chains. Can't seem to recall my true given name. I see my footprints, how they come, how they go. Was that yesterday, or only a moment ago? My heart is gone.
Welcome to the social-engineer.org podcast number 49.
Number 49.
Excellent, Dave. That was our third take, by the way.
Like, okay?
Yeah, that was our third take to get that right, so that was good.
Okay, number 49.
Yeah, excellent.
49.
So, I think they got it.
Number 49.
We are on 49.
49.
Which, actually, if you think about it, is quite impressive. We're almost at the 50th month of doing this together.
Yeah, I agree.
And I got to say, Dave, you've been here since the beginning.
Thank you very much.
And you're here with us this time early, even though some of our other members could not make it today.
Again, Ping with well, she's not even going to be late this time. She's not going to come show up at all. I mean, I think she's like basically reversed my role and become a person that never shows up.
She probably needs a chance to address this at a later time, and I imagine she will.
I'm sure she will, and it will be another podcast that will be scary. And Jordan's not with us today, but as you heard, we have our ever lovely Michelle. And
hey, everyone.
She will be turning into a tiny green rage monster as Dave irritates her throughout the podcast. And Dave, how are you doing today?
You caught me right in the middle trying to get Bruce Hornsby on.
Great. So I'm glad we caught you in the middle of that.
I'm doing great. Having a good day, having a good week. I just flew back from South Carolina, but doing well, man. I can't complain. Business is good. DerbyCon's ramping up, and I'm doing well.
Oh, yeah, we should actually talk about that briefly. Derby. I saw yesterday that you only had 8 tickets left.
We are sold out now.
You're sold out. Okay, so there are no tickets left at this point.
There are no tickets left.
So if you don't have your DerbyCon tickets by the time this podcast comes out, it's not going to happen.
Nope, not going to happen. And so we should also mention to the audience that Chris is bailed out again this year and is not coming. So
I did. It's terrible. I've been begging the DerbyCon crew to not have it at the very end of September because it's always a terribly busy time for me, and they just don't love me enough to make that change. So the first year when you had it at the beginning of September, it was perfect. And when I think it was October or something, that was great. But this year, I just, wow, it's so hard. I really love it too. I really love DerbyCon.
I'm bummed out, man. I'm gonna cry.
I'm actually bummed out. No, I'm not, all joking aside, I am bummed out. I really, really did enjoy DerbyCon, and when we came back from it, I said to my kids, "Hey, I'm bringing you guys. That's going to be your first real con for my daughter because awesome. she really wanted to go because I felt really good there. It was a nice family-oriented atmosphere. I loved how everyone was just sitting around all night chatting about different things, different topics, and it wasn't as crazy and wild. It was kind of very mellow and easy to kind of just get along with everybody there. So it was really nice. I hope it goes as well this year. You're a little bit bigger this year, right?
We are a little bit bigger this year, yep. And we have Crystal Method playing, and it should go really well. We hope.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I am hitting a con though in October. I'm hitting Skydog Con in Tennessee. And we're running the SECTF there for the first time ever out of DEF CON. So we need people to sign up for that. That's going to be exciting for us. Maybe next year we'll see what happens with Derby. If they love us enough to have a different date. We'll see what happens.
We don't.
I know. I figured. But talking about DEF CON, I do want to mention... oh, no.
You can only see me right now, Chris. I'm dancing, like moving my head back and forth and kind of jamming out right now.
Then I guess it's appropriate during this music to thank Trusted Sec for their amazing sponsorship support for the support of DEF CON and the SECTF. It was the best year ever, and people are still talking about it. And we couldn't have done it without Trusted Sec, without Wombat Securities, without Pin Drop Security, without NetSparker. Those guys from Mavatuna Security, the 4 sponsors really made it possible, and they helped us out not just with the financial end of it, but just supporting us and promoting it, and getting it out, getting the word out there. Michelle and I are frantically working on the report, which should be ready in October.
And don't forget Ace Hackware; they were awesome.
Ace Hackware sponsored us with the prizes. and it was very, very, very nice. Our prizes this year were probably the best we ever had. Nice little kits that were made up for any SE pen tester would just love to have what we gave them. Yeah. Okay. I think they got it. The sponsors are very happy now. They've been applauded for hours. But really, seriously, thank you guys, and you can keep checking out the site for links to them and check out what they do, the different sponsors and how they've been what they do in this world, because they all kind of working it to a different level.
Well, and something for next year. I mean, if you're looking to sponsor, you listen to this. I mean, it really was beneficial for us. As a company to be up on there, and I mean the SECTF probably gets one of the most highest rated publicity sides of the house around DEF CON. So for us it was really good to sponsor, and we appreciate everything on our end, of course. So it's really a good sponsorship opportunity for companies looking to do it. I mean, it really does have a benefit, and it really helps out the CTF, which is a really, really important thing that you guys do. And
thanks. Thanks, Dave. I appreciate that. That was like an unplanned promotion for sponsorship, so I appreciate that.
And on the side note,
I was just being honest.
So let's talk a little bit, Michelle, before we get our guest on. Let's talk a little bit what we got going on. Our course schedule is up on the social-engineer.com site. We tried something different this year than we have for the last two, which is we picked 4 locations that we will have our courses throughout the year, and those locations are already picked, solid, and on the site. And the dates are chosen, the weeks for those courses. So we are giving you anywhere from 6 to 12 months or more to choose the course that you want. So no one can say, hey, we just launched it and there's not enough time. We're giving everyone tons of time to choose the course that they want to come to. And we have, remind me, Michelle, Orlando?
Yep, Orlando, February 17th through the 21st. Amsterdam, May 19th through the 23rd. A West Coast location, TBD, either July or early August, and then November 3 through 7 in Reston, Virginia.
Awesome.
And one thing I have to say about the training, you know me. Anytime that I can get a dig in on Chris or make fun of Chris or embellish something with Chris, I do it.
Yes.
But one thing I do have to say is that at Black Hat, there were so many people coming up and saying how awesome your course was and how much they learned from it. So, again, I would make fun of you if any way I could in this situation, but people actually really enjoyed your class and had a ton of fun with it and learned a ton. So I do have to recommend it.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks.
Hey,
I did cry a little.
Yeah, I want to say something sarcastic, but I'm compelled. You have social engineered me to be nice to you at this point.
You see, the whole thing's. I framed everything perfectly. Now Ping's the enemy. Yeah. I'm now in good graces again.
Oh, I hate Ping. I wish she never comes back.
Oh, she's coming back. No worries.
I will pay for all of those comments dearly.
We both will. And Ping, if you listen to this, which I'm sure you won't after, if you do, I was kidding, and I love you. So don't hurt me.
I wasn't.
Yeah. See, she scares me still, so I have to be that way. She scares me. So last month, we got a lot of nice feedback on the podcast with Lily. And one of the things that kind of sparked some comments was Lily talked a little bit about confidence poses. That before she got in the booth, she actually went into an area of the CTF room and stood in a way that confident people stand. She formed her body language to be confident. And she feels that psychologically that helped her to feel confident, to tell herself, I am confident, I'm going to get in there and I'm going to win. And she did just that. So I'm not saying it was just those poses, but it was another arrow in the quiver of her tools that she used to be the winner for the CTF this year. And we thought, well, that's an interesting topic. Who can we get on the podcast that can talk to us about something like that? That has to be in front of crowds all the time. That has to be involved in talking or being in front of people constantly, and may need to use different avenues or methods to build confidence in themselves and make themselves feel more secure before they enter their jobs in front of the crowd. So we were able to get a hold of Neil Fallon. If you don't know who that is, he's the lead singer of the band Clutch, which for Dave and I is one of our all-time favorite bands. I've been listening to Clutch since the early 90s when they came out.
Dude, same here, man.
I remember seeing them in a show in the Florida Fairgrounds when I lived down south, and I was just a little punk teenager, and that is when I fell in love, when they played Transitional Speedway, that album down there, and ever since then I've been hooked. I have every single one of their albums, and just the fact that we got Neil coming on the show is making me like a giddy little schoolgirl. Actually, I need to control. I need to make some confidence poses right here so I don't get all stupid when he comes on. But Neil is just a really awesome guy. So we're going to talk to him a little bit about this topic and how he formulates maybe a pretext for himself in order to get himself in the right frame of mind before he plays a show. And I got some other really cool news before we get Neil on. We're we're going back to some of the old methods for our podcast, where we're going to get quicker into the actual meat of the podcast, and get more into the SE discussions, and we're still going to goof off, as you can tell. Dave's here, so we're never going to stop goofing off.
What?
Yeah, but we're gonna get more into the meat. And with that, we wanted to also, how we do every year, adjust our music selection. And we were talking to the guys from Clutch when we were getting them on the show, and saying, it would be really cool to get a license to use one of your songs. So, as you probably heard in the beginning of this very podcast, our new podcast music for the SE podcast is "Gone Cold" from Clutch. That's the name of the song, "Gone Cold," from their newest album, Earth Rocker. Real bluesy, mellow, awesome song. And even though it doesn't have much to do with SE, it's just a great mood music for setting for what we're about to talk about. So we're going to keep that for a while, and hopefully you guys like that. If you want to check them out, you, of course, can check out Clutch on their site and be able to check out their other albums. I know. It's just awesome. So anyway, we're going to get...
Did you ever listen to, like, one of my favorite songs with them was Escape from the Prison Planet?
Oh, I love that song.
Yeah.
Their self-titled album was just one of my favorites. I actually, now this is going to age me, I actually had cassettes of that because there were no CDs when I was into that. And I ruined like 2 or 3 versions of that cassette listening to it so much. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That does date you, by the way. You're pretty old.
I am actually old. I was just going to say how old I am, then I realized, wait, I'm on the Social Engineer podcast. I probably should not release that information.
Yep, probably not.
Probably
yes.
not.
Well, so the self-titled album came out like 95, 96?
No, I think 95, was it? Yeah, maybe so, because let me see. The first one was Transitional Speedway, and I think that was like 92.
That was 92 or 93.
And then yeah, I think 95 would have been the self-titled.
Yeah.
But
then you had what? Elephant Riders.
Oh my gosh.
Blast Tyrant. I'm trying to think of all I said.
So you had Elephant Riders. Jam Room is like one of my favorite albums ever. And then Pure Rock Fury.
Pure Rock Fury.
You know. And then Blast Tyrant, which is another just ridiculously awesome album.
Yep.
Robot Hive.
Oh, Robot Hive, that's right, yeah.
And From Beale Street. And Strange Cousins from the West, which is... I listen to that album, it just makes me smile. You know?
And I have to honestly admit, I haven't gotten their new one, but I'm downloading it right now from iTunes, Earth Rocker.
That is just a phenomenal album. It's like some old root stuff. You get back to some transitional and some self-titled, it goes back to that level. And then you get that, or the Gone Cold song, which is really bluesy. You get that kind of jam room feel, where it's just really, really awesome. But I don't know. I'm going to talk about this with him too if we get the chance. But they were in a band originally called Glut Trip. That was back in '90. It was a real heavy band. So they changed their whole methodology when they started Clutch.
Yep.
Okay, let's get our buddy on and start the show. Let's see.
I'm so angry right now.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Okay, we're on with our guest now, Neil Fallon, the lead singer of the band Clutch. Neil, great to have you with us today.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So we were just talking a little bit about what it is that interested us in having you on the show, and of course, just to explain a little bit about social engineering. We analyze the human side of security and how it applies to how people react and think to emotional stimuli. And we thought, what better kind of person to have on the show as someone who's in front of different crowds, maybe every night or at least constantly throughout the year, and having to work through their own emotional stuff and deal with their own lives, and yet put on a show and entertain people and keep them entertaining since, for you, it's been since the early 90s doing this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, it's been the better part over 20 years. It's really awkward for me to say that, but that's the case.
Dude,
it certainly doesn't feel like it.
Isn't it amazing when you hear on the radio station, like, you hear like classic alternative? I'm like, oh man.
Classic.
Yeah, it's a drag, when people start talking about Nirvana's Nevermind as being 20 years old and a classic record.
Wow.
I remember when that came out, and I think, wow, that was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I guess that, you can't stop the march of time, but come on, throw me a bone here.
I know, it's before you blink, it's over, man. I mean, it just seems like yesterday I was listening to the Clutch in high school, and lo and behold, we're sitting here, 20 years later.
Well, it's 20 years since Transitional Speedway, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It would be this came out in '93.
So I got to say, you're the only guy. This is totally nothing to do with SE, but you're the only guy who has the same exact beard for the last 20 years. How the heck did you do that?
I didn't really have it too often, the first 10 years, but then it just it started as a byproduct of laziness, just not shaving, and then I would shave it off, and when I saw what lay beneath it, I was so horrified. I said, I just can't get this beard back on quick enough. And you get used to having a beard, and then you take it off, and then you realize you have no chin. It looks like Tippy the Turtle, hung over. And so, nowadays beards are a thing. You've got people that are talking about beard culture, and to me, it's still just a byproduct of not shaving.
Yeah, so nothing deep and mystical behind the beard.
No, not really.
Now, unlike your lyrics, which are usually very deep and brainy, so I'm just curious, when you're writing your lyrics, I mean, there's just so many that are just so ridiculously deep. Is there something that's going through your head saying, let me just stop there. Is there something that's going through your head when you're writing these lyrics? Like, is it a goal education, or just because you read a lot, or how do you come up with this stuff?
Well, I guess for me, when I first started out writing lyrics, it was kind of more emotionally based. Listen to our material, it was kind of more emotive, and that exhausted itself pretty quickly because I'm not, by default, an angry person or a sad person, and my life is very kind of mundane at home, so I don't have a lot of extreme life experiences to share with anybody. So there came a point when I realized I could just kind of approach these lyrics as writing fictions, and that gave me kind of free license to say whatever I wanted to. When I look at the lyrics, I want to be able to look at them on the page without the music and still say they're somewhat interesting. And a lot of times I couldn't tell you 100% what a song is about, but I know it sounds cool. Sometimes it's just striking a balance between the phonetics and the sonics and rhythm and of the lyrics and the meaning. They can't always. How am I trying to say this? It's sometimes the sound of the words are more important than the meaning, and sometimes vice versa. If that makes any sense.
It does. Because I don't even know if you get this a lot, but I'm sure you get this to some extent. You think about like the self-titled album, Animal Farm. You have like that's like one of the craziest songs ever. I mean, out of the middle, obviously it sounds like you're talking about Area 51, you're talking about UFOs, you're talking about space people, but then in the middle, your chorus line, tastes just like chicken, they say. So you sit back and you're like, okay, what is this guy talking about?
Well, that's Yeah, it's hard for me to remember exactly what my thought process was back then, but yeah, I was sort of thinking that it was. Sometimes I have these backstories or these little movies that play in my head that kind of justify the lyrics. I might be the only one that's privy to it, but for example, that one I was thinking about. A Twilight Zone episode, To Serve Man, and the alien comes down and he's got this book called To Serve Man, and everything's going to be great, and this alien race is going to rescue us from ourselves. And then at the very end, they realize that To Serve Man is a cookbook. Oh. And all these people that they're taking from the planet Earth is just a food source. And it's a classic Twilight Zone plot twist, and that was sort of, it's not stated explicitly in the lyrics, but the taste just like chicken, that's what I think, if I recall correctly, where I was kind of grabbing that from.
That is crazy. Okay, so since 95, I've listened to this song, and I've loved it, and never even put those two things together. That is just a crazy, and it makes perfect sense now.
That's awesome.
I actually know that episode of Twilight Zone. That is just crazy.
Was that the Outer Limits? Was that Outer?
Let me do a quick search. Hang on.
I think it was Twilight Zone, but sometimes I.
No, it is Twilight Zone. Here it is on IMDb. Twilight Zone, To Serve Man, TV episode 1962. Classic. And there's the alien holding the cookbook. That is just a classic. Wow. Now I could be done. I'm done. I just learned something that I wanted to know since 95. I don't even know if I can continue. That's just awesome. Yeah, so that's and then you go, and then let's take Burning Beard. Right, so now we shoot forward to like Robot Hive. And you got the song like Burning Beard. But that obviously has got some historical references to like when you talk about the lobsterbacks attack the town again. So you're talking about like British history. It sounds to me like you're talking about either conspiracy theories and things like that.
Well, I've had a love-hate relationship with conspiracy theories. I think I loved them when I first found out about a lot of these things, listening to Art Bell late at night, driving the van through New Mexico to Texas and getting freaked out listening to these things. And then with the advent of the Internet, it seemed that a lot of conspiracy theories went from kind of this entertainment value it went from fiction and speculation to facts. And nowadays, I think people put entirely too much stock in a lot of these things, just kind of assuming that if it's a conspiracy theory, then it must be fact. The way I look at these things is they're great fodder for lyrics because, well, no one can tell me I'm right or wrong about this. It's just colors in the paint box for an analogy. With Burning Beard, and this kind of goes hand in hand with conspiracy theories. One of the things that I've always been considered interesting is kind of the fine line between madness and artistic inspiration. And sometimes those lines get blurred. And I'm not even just talking about how actors confuse themselves with their characters or that kind of cliche, but trying to pull one's hair out artistically, you can kind of go into these areas of your mind where you're making leaps of logic or reason, which if you can express them artistically, that it's wonderful. But if you can't, they just end up being voices in your head. And that's kind of what I was thinking about writing those lyrics. And that was, sometimes songs write themselves very quickly. Sometimes they take months. That one, the entirety of it, I think I wrote the entire song in 15 minutes.
Really?
And it was just more of a stream of conscious, automatic writing. That's why there's so much kind of coming at you from different angles. If I had stopped, and the other was more of an issue of practicality. I had just been lazy and hadn't written anything, and we tracked this song in the studio, and I had 2 days to write lyrics. If I had not been given that luxury, and I mean that deadline, and had the luxury of editing myself, it probably would have come out a lot more bland.
That to me just kind of freaks me out a little bit, because that song, out of most. You have so many references. I mean, in the beginning you talk about lobster backs, then you kind of you move over to like Roman, like the New Praetorian, the Fields of Elysian. You talk about you reference Stephen Covey's book, what was that, The 7 Habits of the Highly Effective Calf, right? And you talk about IBM and the Golden Parachute. You're going through, and then Occam's Razor. I mean, the normal average person, I would imagine, has to go and actually look up half of this stuff and go, okay, what is he even talking about?
I most remember drinking a lot of coffee when I wrote that lyrics.
Because if that stuff is in your head, then maybe you read way too many books.
Well, I guess there is. I also have to acknowledge that at that time I was reading a lot of Philip K. Dick, and particularly the Valis and Timothy Archer books, where it's kind of autobiographical, but he kind of deals with the subject of, am I going insane, or am I seeing the other side of a reality, and kind of how one argues with that. As far as those references go, I kind of jot these things down on pieces of paper all the time, and when it comes time to write lyrics, I'll kind of flip through a notebook and look if any of these things strike a note with me. And sometimes they do, and it doesn't work out, and I kind of see it as lyrics as a grab bag sometimes.
Yeah, because I guess, like, looking at this, I'm thinking, when you're writing this stuff, do you have a goal to educate people maybe about history, or about that issues are in your mind, or is it really just, hey, I'm going to write something because this is what's in my head right now?
I think I'm attracted to history and mythology because it automatically infuses lyrics, or even if you're writing a novel or short story, it automatically infuses those stories with a much larger picture. So I mentioned in just for that as an example, the New Praetorian. Well, suddenly you just have that one word, but then there's all these images and backstories that suddenly erupt in the song. So I see that as kind of, they're carrying a lot of the load. I like those. I'm certainly not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. I just see these things as raw materials to work with, and my opinions change pretty frequently. That's why I like kind of staying a bit nebulous about subject matters, because like I said, I'm no expert.
Yeah. Because obviously the lyrics, in my opinion, tell a story about you. I mean, even if it's not directly related, it's obviously telling people a little bit, like, this guy's educated, he reads a lot, he obviously is a thinker, because there's some depth to this. Even, like, just going back to Burning Beard, I mean, you take simple lines like, what's the one, it's about crane. Every time I open my window, cranes flying to terrorize me. There's a lot of, you have to think about that, right? Because why use cranes? Why isn't it ravens? And there's historical things about crane, whatever. And you have all this, and people may get to know about you. So is what people know about you from the public perception different or the same as who you are in real life?
I think it's quite, well, I guess it would depend on person to person. There's people that, when they see the band on the stage and hear lyrics, they have a very kind of specific idea of, and I think this would go to any artist, of what that person is like. When they see me and the rest of the guys on, John Paul for that matter, bashing away on his drums and me screaming into the microphone, a lot of people think that's kind of how I'm running 24/7. Like, I would go through the drive-thru at Starbucks and scream at the guy, give me a coffee. It's not, it's not like that. It's very mundane. It's going through the motions of that's not the right phrase. Doing a performance is very therapeutic, and because I get to yell and dance around like a madman for an hour and a half every night, I feel pretty even-keeled, usually for the rest of the day. And I enjoy peace and quiet more than anything else, because I'm around loud stuff constantly. No, but it's also really hard to talk about oneself. I mean, I don't really know exactly what kind of person I am. I'm sure other people have a better idea than I do.
Yeah, because I guess what would seem hard to me is people like us. We've been listening to you for 20 years, so you kind of have this vision in your head that who these people are. And do you get that way? Like when fans meet you, is it like they think they know everything about you and who you are as a person, and yet that's just who you are on stage? And how do you deal with that if that's the case?
Well, I find usually what people's perceptions 9 times out of 10 says a whole lot more about them than it does me or anyone else. I think people always bring interpretations. They bring their preconceived notions to the table ahead of time. If they are very politically minded, they might hear all sorts of political motivations behind lyrics. If they're particularly religious, they might hear some kind of religious motivations, or you name it. It runs the gamut. And to me, I guess I'm too lazy to dedicate myself to any particular vision of reality. I kind of just take what comes and throw it on paper and hope it entertains people. One of the things I often think about, not to get too philosophical, but I think one of the great advantages of the human mind that got us out of the woods and into the cities is our ability to see patterns in chaos. And people see patterns in everything without even knowing it, and sometimes they do it for good, sometimes for ill. People see patterns in the Bible to commit atrocities. Sometimes people see patterns in lyrics to do atrocities as well. I mean, you could take, for example, Manson using the Beatles and seeing patterns in that to justify his vision of his world vision. That's a very extreme example, but sometimes I get that from people saying, "Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about, bro."
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of weird because I don't really know what I'm talking about.
Well, it's really interesting, Neil. You're talking a lot about the frames that people have that affect how they interpret your messaging. And so just out of curiosity, are you ever deliberate in sort of the message that you're trying to convey to people? Or do you sort of leave it up to your listener to create their own reality, I guess, basically?
I guess it would be that. I don't... I leave it up to them because I think that's more interesting. If I look at a lyric and I say, this song is about this at this time, then it's kind of dead in the water even for me. For example, if I were the kind of lyricist that wrote about the big breakup or the heartbreak, then it's just kind of one thing, and maybe other people can, relate it to their own lives, but I find much more entertainment value for myself in kind of looking back at it. And even if I wince at the lyrics saying, "Oh, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense," it still leaves artistic wiggle room.
Sure.
But having said that, because I do that, sometimes people can hit me with some really left-of-field interpretations of stuff. A perfect example of that would be the song 100010.
Oh, I love that song.
I completely picked those numbers from random.
You know how long I spent trying to figure out in binary if that really meant anything? I actually spent time trying to figure out if you were trying to say something with that.
Well, a lot of people did, and here's the truth. I didn't even know that there was a whole subculture of people who are into binary code.
Yeah. Are you kidding? This is what we do for a living, man. We write stuff in binary.
When I saw the name, when I first saw the name get released, I'm like, "Oh, sweet, computers."
Yeah.
That's how I found out about it. I did this. I'm the layman. I'm the definition of the end user. So when I said these things, it was just like treating those numbers like they were a pair of congos or bongos. It was rhythmical. And then suddenly out of the woodwork, people were saying, does it mean this? I interpreted this, but because, if you just add one more one, it becomes this.
Yeah.
And it was whether it could be text or it could be a visual representation. And when I told people it was random. A lot of these people got really gutted and disappointed.
It made me laugh. It made me laugh because I spent hours on these forums with guys online trying to figure out what it meant, and we actually did go through and reorganize the zeros and the ones, and is it some kind of code? Is he telling us something about the album, the meaning of the song? And then you had this thing, I think, an interview, someone asked you, and you were like, no, that was just random stuff. And we were like, what? I laughed for like a half an hour, like, this guy's crazy. I just wasted like hours of my life on nothing.
Well, I'm sorry. I wish I could give it back to you.
No, it's a good lesson. It's a great lesson.
Put a little bit more thought into it, but that goes back to like the battle between meaning and sound. That's the time where I leaned just on the sound and meaning. It didn't even matter. If I wanted to have a binary code for something that I wanted to get in there, would probably, one, be entirely too long, or two, just the rhythm wouldn't have felt right.
And that it really does. You are right about that part. Like when you're saying the sound of that, trying to add any other combination of those numbers really wouldn't make as much sense as the 10001. You know, isn't that terrible? I can probably actually repeat the numbers because of singing that song so many times and believing that it actually meant something. So that is actually a great. I mean, now you've told me like the 3 or 4 things about your songs that I've been singing for 20 years that that now I'm realizing that are just you being you. That's crazy.
And, to be honest, sometimes, like I say, I don't really know exactly what a song is about. Sometimes I do figure it out much later, like when I'm able to have the luxury of hindsight and say, oh, that was going on at the time, whether it be something in my life or something on the news or something in my neighborhood, and then I could see maybe how that, maybe not specifically, maybe more just like the mood or the atmosphere of a song, it makes more sense to me.
So do you ever go to like these lyricmeanings.com and just kind of review what people are saying about your albums and what they believe it means?
I've never done that, and I probably never want to do that.
Yeah, I was just curious because I didn't know how that would affect you, because there's like people who've devoted hours of time to go through Clutch lyrics and define what they mean, and there's this one site which has like all of your songs, and you can click on them, and then people will debate back and forth as to the meaning of your lyrics and what it's pointing to. And what I find interesting is what you said before, depending on where the person is in their life. So like what Michelle was saying, we call that their frame. What their frame is, what their psychological frame is in life, determines on what they see in your lyrics. Especially some of the songs like in Jam Room, you can have people who will see see deep religious overtones or see deep philosophical overtones. And they're talking about this back and forth, and maybe, at the end of the day, like what you're saying here, it's just, heck, you had a movie going on in your head, you read a book a few days ago, and there's your lyrics.
It's often very much that simple. I mean, sometimes lyrics are excruciating, and, it can take a long time to write and be the most frustrating thing in the world, and it can be the most satisfying thing to get something done. But I think that operation is kind of typical for most artists, whether they be musicians or lyrics, poets, sculptors, or painters. They're just taking their life experiences and filtering them, through probably processes that in their subconscious they're not even aware of, and it ends up being delivered to the public. And there it is, it's done. And I think most artists kind of like to step away and move on to the next thing because they have a creative impulse and don't want to kind of relive, what they just worked on. I think that's probably why I'm scared to read, these lyric interpretations. Probably because it would also get my blood pressure up.
Well, Neil, along those same lines, you talk about how sort of these lyrics are written based on sort of where you are and you leave them open for interpretation, but clearly all of those things affect your relationship and your rapport with your audience as well. And so I'm just curious as far as, Clutch has a great reputation for its fans and its really rabid fan base. And so how would you say, do you tend to be conscious about how you manage that? Because really the only ways that you communicate with your audience in that respect are through your lyrics and the messages that you have to impart.
I think with Clutch fans have a pretty sensitive BS meter. And I think if we did anything other than what we've been doing, kind of presenting ourselves, just as who we are, we would get called out on it. If the next tour we showed up with a bunch of production and we also had matching suits, and that would probably alienate 90% of our fan base.
I would cry, just so you know. I would cry.
Yeah, I think that the fact that we never really try to visually overdo it. I think Clutch fans are possessive about us in that it was usually a word of mouth thing. A lot of people, or like yourselves, saw us at a show. Lord knows it's not because they got hammered over the head on the radio with our music. And I think there's a camaraderie with Clutch fans that we're lucky to have. And people say, "Oh, you're a cult band," but that's cool. I'd rather have it this way. Building a house out of stone takes a lot longer than sticks, and a lot of bands' curse is a huge hit, and they're forced to live up to that and usually fail. I think keeping it simple is what a lot of people like about the band. There's just us. We plug into our heads, and John Paul's not on a giant drum riser and might have something of a light show, but that's really all there is to it. And it's a bit of a party atmosphere.
I guess that's kind of another thought I have is, throughout the years that you've been around, of course, there's bands that have come and gone, and the draw, it would seem, and I'm not in the music industry at all, but the draw would seem you got these people who go out and make millions of dollars with their top 40 pop kind of stuff, and yet you guys for 20 years have stuck to your roots and who you are and staying the same. Have you ever? I don't know. I'm trying to formulate the question because I had one in my head and then it kind of went away. It just turned into a statement. But was there ever pressure from like your label or your managers to say, guys, man, if you just do like one really poppy song, you can turn into this mega band?
There was pressure, and we never bent, and that's why we always got dropped. That, and we never gave them the gold records. That's the real reason that they were looking for. For specific examples, I remember when we were doing Elephant Riders, our A&R representative at the time wanted us to put a cover on it. And the first cover that he suggested was Mama Said Knock You Out by LL Cool J. And we said, no, we're not going to do that. And then about 6 months later, he really, really kind of turned up the fire and wanted us to cover My Sharona by the Knack. And it was just it just went in one ear and went out the other, because the philosophy behind that is if it was a hit once, it can be a hit again. And there's a lot of bands that have had success with just covering a song and having a hit. And, that's great, and I'm not dogging it, but that's certainly not Clutch. If we're going to cover a song, it's going to be because we enjoy the song for what the song is. There was also maybe a bit of pressure when we had Careful With That Mic, which to me was always sort of a goof. And I think for pretty much up until the album went to pressing, I was thinking that it wasn't even going to end up on the record because it was so anomalous to our music. And it was just sort of something fun that we did in the studio. Then it had some minor success at radio, and then the label was like, you should probably write more songs like that. Just no. Even if it were a smash hit, I would suddenly find myself doing something that I don't enjoy. And the whole point of doing this is to have fun.
Yeah.
And I think I speak for everyone else in the band. To be able to make a living doing something that we love is, I think, all that anyone's asking for. looking to be famous or, have 8-car garages. We just want to be able to go out, play some shows, go home, write music, and do it again. And fortunately, we've been able to do that. I'm sure there's been feast and famine, but the music's always gotten us through that.
One of the other things that you hear a lot in music, is, especially, in the recent few years, bands will resort to either really explicit lyrics, a lot of profanity or other things, to kind of get the hook in there and sell more records. And that's one thing I can honestly say, besides Transitional Speedway, with that one song, you guys really never went down that path. Ever went down that path. There's no problem slapping your CD in front of the kids, and you don't have to worry about anything. Getting you have to explain something really weird. So, what was that actually a literal thing that you thought about? Like you said, I'm gonna not do this.
Yeah, I think there was, and with Transnational, there's a barrage of curse words on there, and I think just from a shock is cheap and easy. It really is. It's the laziest trick in the show business book to say boo to somebody, and there was a lot of guys that did that in the 70s, and it was exciting, back then. Nowadays, shock, it's just so cheap and lazy, whether it be verbal shock or visual shock. I find it to be it's almost the opposite of shocking. It's just kind of lowest common denominator, and violence for that matter. Violence and hate and negativity it's a real emotion for people, but it's an easy sell. It's easy to sell people an adrenaline rush, and that works for some bands, and maybe they live that way 24/7. But that seems like a lot of work to do that. And bands that I know that enjoyed some success out of the gates, either looking like they were going to beat the crap out of you, or they were from the seventh circle of hell. I think that wears off pretty quickly, and they loathe having to be that character over and over and over again. Fortunately, we never embraced that. And as far as profanity goes, I think if it's used in the right context, sure. But a lot of times it's just empty meaning. It's just an interjection, like saying wow or golly, but just amped up, on steroids. I'd rather give a noun.
Yeah, it's interesting. We made a similar decision. This is our 49th podcast, so 49 podcasts ago, to always keep this so someone can listen to it at work and do just what you said. Use an adjective, use a noun, use something else that could be listened to at work in the car with the kids, and get our message across without having to use the shock, awe, and fear factors. And that's what made this podcast successful, is that people will comment on that just as much as they comment on the content of this show. They love the content, but they'll comment that what they love about it is they can be listening to it at work, and when the female boss walks in, they don't have to turn it off because they're embarrassed by something that's being said.
Yeah.
And then you interact with people's brains that way, and when you interact with their brains, I think then you make a longer lasting relationship to their motivation to be part of your group or to want to listen to your music or whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah, I think it's. I would agree. Sure. I'll be the first to admit I have a potty mouth, and it's becoming abundantly clear now that my 3-year-old son is repeating things sometimes that makes my jaw drop.
I'm the same way, man. I accidentally slip like an F-bomb or an S word, and I got twins that are 2.5 or 3.5, and then a 5-year-old. So they definitely repeat what I say. Yeah,
it's a good exercise and reflection to have a permanent echo walking 2 feet behind you 24/7.
So, kids will correct that. I tell you, I have 2 also, and they will correct that the first time you hear them say something that you never heard yourself really say.
Yeah, and then we all know it usually happens in the car. That's when they get the real gems.
Yes, that's true.
Hey, Neil, I have a question for you. So, and this came from myself and Nick, who's probably one of your biggest fans. He works for me at my company here. We're huge Doctor Who fans.
Is Nick around? Is Nick around?
We should get. Yeah, he's around.
Okay. Oh, hold on. Before you ask this question, let me get him in.
We got to get him in here for this one.
Because if you're asking a Doctor Who question, I think Nick needs to.
Yeah, and I'm obsessive of Doctor Who. I mean, I have like posters everywhere, signed autographed copies of stuff. You know, I got TARDIS is everywhere. But anyway, the question's on Unto the Breach. But we'll get into that in a second.
Hang on, I'm dialing Nick up. Let's see if he actually answers. Nick?
Hello?
Hey, Nick?
Yeah.
Don't say anything terribly stupid. You're on with Neil Fallon and Dave and Michelle.
Well, hello. And hello. And hello.
Hey there, Nick. That's my son's name.
So we wanted to get you on, Nick, because Dave is about to ask a Doctor Who question. And we felt that it only appropriate, since you're like probably the biggest fan that I personally know, to have you on, especially if Neil's going to like cut down Doctor Who or something like that. That'd be great to watch you cry, but let's just see what he says. Okay. Go ahead, Dave.
So Neil, our question is: Was Unto the Breach like inspired by Doctor Who? Because we noticed that you said a Time Lord and Daleks and things like that. What was the meeting on from Unto the Breach? And I know that you had multiple writers on this too, right?
Multiple writers?
Yeah, I was looking at the source for the writers, and it said like Richard Salt, Dan Maines, Gaster, and you.
Well, that's how we split everything down the line.
Gotcha.
I write all the lyrics, but as far as the song and as a whole, we split it equally.
Got it.
But to answer your question about the lyrics, when I was really young, well, maybe junior highs, I was a Doctor Who freak, and to me, Tom Baker always has been and will be the Doctor Who, and that's because he was the guy who played it when I first got into it.
Dude, I'll send you a picture. I got a like a collector's item, Tom Baker, thing in front of me right now with a scarf and everything.
Well, that's above my pay grade. I mean, I love Doctor Who. I'll be honest, the latest incarnations I haven't kept up with just because I have a hard time keeping up with anything on TV. But those shows I watched religiously when it was kind of a very formative period for me when I was into all things sci-fi and fantasy for the first time, and that kind of helped form my. I just loved sort of the absurdist notions that were often presented in the show, and I kind of went hand in hand at the same time that Douglas Adams' work was being thrown around quite a bit, and that kind of crept up into this song. Exactly how I couldn't tell you. I just, these are one of those songs where probably a year from now I'll have a better idea what it's about.
Sure. Yeah, it was just curious for us because it's pretty obviously being Doctor Who fans is cool, and I agree. I mean, Fourth Doctor is probably one of the best ones out there, but Nick, I think Nick and I were kind of curious on it.
Yeah, I was definitely wondering. It's in my opinion the best song in the album.
Oh, thank you. It was I'm trying to do instant recall on the writing process of that one, but I do remember just kind of wanting to write a science fiction short story in 3.5 minutes. And that meant using a lot of kind of familiar images that people could immediately know what I was talking about. And so I could say, instead of saying describing what a Dalek looks like without saying Dalek, I could just say Dalek. And then everyone says, okay, that. And then the listener can go and run with it.
Along that line, I know you and I talked about this, but it was off the show. Brazenhead. Is that really about the pub called Brazenhead in Dublin, Ireland?
There was a working title that it was, but we wrote the song shortly after having been there. What transpired there, I couldn't tell you because I don't really remember a thing. But I just remember thinking that name was just it just carried a lot of impact. And whether you're talking actually about a brass head or someone who's just a hothead or just a bully or whatever you want to interpret it as, the song itself, I don't see the lyrics as having anything to do with the title. I couldn't think of anything cooler than the phrase Brazenhead.
Yeah. That is a fun place, though. I mean, especially being the oldest pub in Dublin. So
yeah, we've only played Dublin a handful of times. We've been trying to get back to Ireland for ages now, but we had a real blast there.
So on the psych side, now are you the kind of, and I don't know this about you, I don't know if you don't want to release this information, you don't have to, but are you the kind of guy that loves to play shows, like you love being in front of people? It's some people love the spotlight and love to be there, or are you more of a guy that really has to get yourself worked up to do that?
It's both. I mean, I love doing it. Usually, like the first couple shows, I have to calm myself down just because I'm not used to doing it, and I don't, maybe don't think I'm as prepared enough as I should be. Clutch never rehearses for a tour.
Really?
Never. We never. I don't think we've ever once done it. It was just up to everybody to. Actually, we have a show this weekend in Canada. And this morning I text Dan and say, hey, can you write a set list so I can listen? And then I'll go listen to these songs on my iPod just to get my head wrapped around it, because it's just such a different context from where I am right now and a stage. But then there's points when you're on tour for 2 months, and then you feel like it's a bit like Groundhog Day, and I'm in the middle of a song, and I'll ask myself, is this the second verse from tonight, or is this the third verse from last night? And it has nothing to do with using illicit substances or just not paying attention. It's just it can become, even though you might even be in a different country, when you're doing it night after night after night, it becomes very much a ritual, and time becomes bent in directions that they usually don't. But I always, even if I'm having a bad show, I tell myself, this bad show is better than, a great day of sitting in morning traffic in Washington, D.C.
Well, that's for sure. D.C. traffic stinks. So are there certain things that you do before you go on stage to kind of prep yourself mentally for being in front of, I mean, some of your shows, that I've seen were in smaller venues, and some of them are in huge places. So when you're in front of a monster crowd, is there something you have to do differently than when you're in front of a small crowd to just kind of prep yourself to be in front of that many people?
It's almost the opposite as most people think. I find playing in front of a huge crowd, we just did a run of festivals in Europe where tens and tens and tens of thousands of people. When that happens, the crowd gets physically farther away, and it's a wider peripheral vision, and it goes farther back to the horizon. The faces become more like TV snow.
Yes,
and it's much more impersonal, and I feel I have to dig into it even harder to kind of get that rush.
I can't agree with you more. I mean, like when I'm doing presentations, let's just say it's in front of 5,000 people I'm giving a presentation to. I mean, I almost feel like I have to stay kind of within my confines. I can't go out or anything like that. And when it's a smaller crowd, I feel like I can be more extroverted. Have more fun with the crowd. Personalize a little bit more. So I guess it's kind of the same in the music industry as well.
Yeah, and I think it's engaging people just with making eye contact, or someone waves or you wave back. That's easy to do when you're in a 500 capacity club. But when you're in a field with 50,000 people, that's tough. And Clutch is a band that does both of those environments back to back. And sure, I love playing to as many people as possible, but I find it much easier to be in their face. It's just more of a rush, and it's easier to sink one's teeth into.
Is there a process that you follow to get yourself ready mentally to be then? Because the smaller shows are definitely more personal, and you have to be more interactive with the crowd. Is that ever a problem where you say, okay, I gotta? Look, what I'm getting at is we had a person on last month that won a social engineering contest where she had to make some calls to companies. First time she ever did this, and she got herself into a pose that built confidence for herself, and she found that through this research that she was reading that this could help help her when she feels nervous. So are there things that you do like that to get yourself confident and ready, or is it just, hey, I'm ready all the time to go do this?
Well, there's, I guess, two things that immediately jump to mind and that we do as a group. We write a different set list every night. Sure, it may not be all different songs. It might even be one or two songs different in a different order. But because of that, we're forced to look at the set list and see if there's any surprises. And even if there's a song that we haven't played often, that bit of fear is good because it gets the adrenaline up and we focus more. If we do the same set list every night, that gives us, we can start daydreaming, and that's I know when I start making the mistakes when I daydream, because I'm thinking about something else completely unrelated to the 5,000 people in front of me. There's that, and this is gross, but I think it's a true thing. Show clothes, I put on usually the same shirt for 3-4 nights in a row before it becomes a hazmat scene, and the same pants. And I swear to you, just the smell of it, suddenly it activates some kind of state of mind that I associate with that smell and being on stage, that it's almost like an immediate response. It's disgusting. Yes, it's true.
No, that's actually really fascinating, Neil, because so what you're saying is like your olfactory senses kick in, and that creates a psychological response to be prepared to go out and do a show. That's actually really, that's the first time I've ever heard that in that sense, that using that sense, the sense of smell, to get yourself mentally ready to do the job you have. That's really fascinating.
It's something I've only noticed in the past couple of years, and the same with going into the club. If we're in a climate-controlled dressing room or on a tour bus, and walk straight onto the stage, I suddenly have a bit of a panic attack. But if I go in there and hear the crowd and smell the crowd, then it's the mind starts going to that level of preparedness. And if I'm getting nervous or I feel unfocused, then I just kind of do a breathing exercise where I just close my eyes and breathe slowly for a couple minutes and do my vocal warm-ups. And then, if I'm not prepared at that point, too bad, because I got to go on stage anyway.
And is Jean-Paul and Dan and Tim the same? The same as you?
For those guys, it's much more just about just going through their instruments and playing, scales or just playing whatever. Jean-Paul is a rehearsal and practice machine, and he just does rudiments on a practice pad for hours and hours and hours. And I know he has a very, then when it gets close to set time, he does a very specific ritual. And I think it is called the ritual. It's a drummer thing, that's a series of drum rudiments that lasts about 15 minutes. And it's a bit of a memory exercise. And once that's done, usually maybe 5 minutes before the show, everyone puts their instruments down. We crack open a beer, and then don't talk about anything about the show, and then we have a song that we play to get on stage. It's Chuck Brown and Soul Searchers, "Money," and if I hear that song at home, if I were to hear that song on my stereo right now, I'm sure my heart rate would go up.
That's an interesting point too. That all those things are linked into your psychological readiness to get on stage and do your job.
And that's usually, when it's a typical scenario, when we're at a club, we usually go on at, 10 or 10:30. That's the typical thing. Sometimes if it's a festival and we got to go on at 3:00 in the afternoon, then it's a struggle. We've only been awake for, 3-4 hours. But it's good to get, have that safety net taken away from you every once in a while to have your point of reference.
Yeah.
No, it's okay. I just didn't want to interrupt. Neil, first of all, permission to act like a giddy schoolgirl. I've been following you since Chris actually got me into you guys back in, what was that, mid-90s? I think self-titled.
Yeah, mid-90s.
And I really enjoyed your comments about, how you feel as far as versus a large venue versus a small venue. To this day, the best concert, I've been to a lot of them, the best concert show that I've ever been at was when you played, I think it was Croc Rock in Allentown, PA.
Crocodile Rock?
Yeah. That will, I don't know if that will ever be topped by far, but much respect and really interesting. And when you were talking about Jean-Paul, he's one of my idols, for sure. I'm a drummer myself at an amateur level, so I'll watch a lot of his maneuvers and his the way he plays and his style. And I've tried to mimic, and actually I can play through most of self-titled, but the new stuff is just incredible. It's very hard to actually mimic, but much respect to you guys.
One thing, I've been around drums for over 20 years, and I still can't play a lick. It's shameful. And I know for him, he considers himself a student, and he's always studying. And I think that has a lot to do with his playing, that he's constantly trying to improve himself or, learn the subtleties of drumming and the history of drumming and taking it, kind of embracing it as a science and an art form.
Yeah, it shows. It shows for sure.
Man, Neil, this has just been tremendous for us. I'm kind of taken back. It was a lot of things you said. Of course, we were really getting into the lyrics a lot, which was interesting for me just from a personal fan level. But I think you're the first person that we've ever talked to in 49 podcasts where we ask how they prep themselves for the job that they're doing, and they use the olfactory senses to prep themselves.
Well, I think that's something I just didn't even notice until recently, and I would suspect that maybe sports guys have the same thing if they smell the latex of their shoulder pads or whatever. There might be a similar thing. I'd noticed it if I have a show shirt that I've worn quite a bit, and I bring it home and I wash it. If I even perspire a little bit, it just activates old nightclub scent. So I usually have to just kind of throw those shirts away. But when I noticed that, I kind of, my head wandered into that world, and that's when I started thinking about that.
Yeah, no, there's a bunch of research. I'm sorry, Michelle. There was just a bunch of research done over the years, not just recently, but into the olfactory senses being used for memory recall. People who have memory loss or amnesia or things like that, trying to find odors that were maybe akin to their childhood because of pictures, and then they would bring those odors into them and trying to recreate the memory, the synapses that would react and say, hey, this is the memory you can have from your childhood. So it is an amazing sense that we have, a powerful sense that can do that, but I just never heard anyone actually identify that that's the thing that gets them in the readiness. It
is amazing. It's almost, I've noticed if I walk into a house or a restaurant that uses gas that's been cooking bacon, I immediately go back to my grandmother's kitchen. Or there's a particular woman's perfume, I don't know what it's called, but if an elderly lady walks by and was wearing that perfume, I'm going to think about my Aunt Joan. And it brings back, it's so strong, it often feels like deja vu. It's almost like there's a bit of vertigo to it when I think it activates those memories because it's so deep in your memory banks that it kind of bubbles up, and it's a bit disconcerting when you're not expecting it.
Well, it actually makes a lot of sense. The olfactory bulb is the only one of our senses that's directly hooked into parts of our brain that are associated with memory, and that's why when you smell something, it can take you back to really, really old times in the past. And so what you're doing, Neil, makes perfect sense in terms of associating memory with times and performance.
It is pretty fascinating. And
Neil.
Too bad just the nightclub stench is what I have to use.
Yeah, but we're avoiding the part that it's 3-day-old sweaty clothes. Yeah. We're not really. We're fascinated by the physiology and the psychology behind it. But the fact that it's your nasty smelling clothes, we're trying to not imagine that. Yeah,
let's just gloss over that.
Yeah, we're brushing that part under the rug.
One quick question. I don't know really where I read this. I remember reading it probably 10, 15 years ago. But there was something about how you and the band had this routine of where you got fried chicken at one place every week. Is that part of your routine still? I think it's really interesting because of thinking about your dynamic of being a team and being clutch. I think it was mentioned in one of your interviews where you said, if one of us was to break away, we wouldn't be clutch anymore. Do things like that, gatherings and meeting once a week, or having a routine like that as a band aid in that?
Well, to answer your question about fried chicken, that came about when we were very frustrated with the bios that the major labels were writing for us, and they were always very hyperbolic and just talking about how, ass-kicking Southern nuclear blast, melt your face riffs with whiskey-soaked lyrics, and it was just over and over again. I know their heart's in the right place, but I ended up writing a bio, and for I don't know why I put that thing in about fried chicken, and suddenly it became a thing, and people were bringing us fried chicken, nearly 5-6 days a week. I know I personally put on a great deal of weight, and that was it had some element of truth in it. When we go down south, we definitely hit up Bojangles, but nowadays, to be honest, our bodies aren't processing fried chicken and beer and after-show pizza quite like they did when we were 20. So we have to be a little bit more conscious of the long-term of what we're putting in our bodies. And the other part of your question, for us, we've known each other for so long. There's so many understood things and things we don't have to talk about that when someone comes into our ranks, I'm sure it's very awkward for them because we just go about our routines without speaking about what's going to happen. If somebody screws up, we know how to give each other room, and we grew up together and we learned how to play our instruments together. So it's a wonderful thing that we don't ever have to think about anything else other than this. But we also, now that we're older, realize that's a very fragile and rare thing. So we're very protective of it, and we tend to circle the wagons very tightly in times of trouble.
That is a rare thing, especially in the entertainment industry. It seems where not only in like physical marriages, but in team togetherness, they seem to just break up constantly. So 20 years—that's a long time to be a band without replacing a team member. Without someone moving on and having the same vision, and no one at one point saying, "Boy, I really love to be like super rich and famous right now. I'm going to go into this top 40 band."
Yeah, and I think we do enjoy each other's company, believe it or not. It's after a show we hang out and we listen to usually something pretty mellow, and that usually freaks people out when they come and see what it's like after at a Clutch show, that it's just a bunch of guys, kicking it, like they're at the old man bar. But it's, we laugh a lot, and we still do. And sure, we have quarrels, but so does every family.
So one thing we always ask our guests that come on, and I'm gonna ask you the same question, but I have a side B to it. Any books that you recommend our listeners love to read? Especially books that have influenced guests that they find interesting. So, any books that you think that are really interesting that you would recommend?
Yeah, I'm sad to say the past couple of books I've read are terrible, so I can't recommend any of those. One that comes to mind that I read recently that I'm thinking about rereading, which I rarely do within a year or two of having read a book, is Paul Astor's New York Trilogy. and Paul Auster is, maybe it's Astor, I believe it, Auster or Astor. He is sort of a noir novelist who writes. He's got a series of 3 short stories that kind of interlock in a lot of ways that are detective stories that take place in a kind of ambiguous New York. You don't know exactly when this takes place, but it's. I think I would imagine a lot of your listeners would enjoy the psychological aspects of these stories, and that's one that I can highly recommend.
Yeah, that's like an older book, right? The 80s?
Yeah, it came out in the mid-late 80s.
Yeah.
As far as new books, shoot, I haven't read any new ones.
No, that's great. We love that. And then music. Besides, obviously, Clutch. What do you guys listen to?
Let's see. I listen to a lot of radio on the internet, but particularly WWOZ from New Orleans. They have a phenomenal radio station. But as far as bands go, there's an English band called Wolf People that I'm really into now. Just got hip to them. It's rock and roll, but the vocals are really, really unique. Would remind you of kind of early King Crimson. Pretty easy on the ears. The guy's not trying to rip your head off with his vocals or anything, which I find very refreshing.
Yes, very refreshing.
Other than that, that's the first thing that comes to mind. I would recommend people check out Wolf People if they like rock and roll. That's a great new band.
Yeah, we will. Awesome. And if people want to, and a lot of people probably know who you are from this community, but let's say they want to know more about you guys, where do they check you out on the web?
Our official website is prorock.com. That's PRO-ROCK.com. And all the other pertinent links are available right through that one.
And you guys are like on a ridiculous tour right now.
Actually, I'm at home. I've been at home for quite some time. We've wrapped up a very long tour, which for all intents and purposes was about five months long, 6 months long.
But you start like in 2 days, don't you?
We fly to Canada for one show over the weekend, come back, have 2 weeks off. Then we do 2 weeks in September. We'll have October off. Then we do all of November on the road. Have most of December off. Then we do a Christmas run between Christmas and New Year's. And then in February we go to Australia.
And that is a far, far flight, Australia.
Yeah, it's pretty psychedelic how long it is.
Yeah, it is. We were just looking into that because we had some work that we might be going there for. And just, it's like, it literally is, when you say the middle of nowhere, Australia is the middle of nowhere.
The English did a wonderful job of finding a place to dump off their undesirables.
Yeah.
Far away from their island as it gets.
Yeah, really far. I mean, it's like even the midway points where you land just to refuel are you're still like 12 to 14 hours on a plane. Once you get to the midway points, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, it's especially when you look at the map of your flight progress, and all it is just a field of blue for hours. That's when you start thinking about where's that life jacket at.
Yeah, I've had a couple of those flights. Not too nice and happy, but this is more than I expected, really.
I wish I could have been more specific with a lot of those lyrics, but now I have to look them up and say, well, yeah, what am I talking about here?
No, I tell you, the best story to date still is how many hours I spent on the 010011 thinking that it was some kind of top secret code to find out that it was just nothing. So
red herring.
that is just, to me, that's epic, and I love it. But just finding out how you even come about with these things, that's great, and how you prepare yourself for shows. All of this is fascinating to us because it's understanding different people react different ways to the same scenarios. Really helps us to kind of delve deeper into the whole human side of this. So you've been a fascinating guest, man.
Hey, thank you. Once again, I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, and I want to thank you, and of course we all do, express to the band for the permission to use Gone Cold for the podcast. That is really one of our all-time favorite songs, and just having it, being able to represent the SE podcast is a huge deal for us.
Hey, our pleasure. Go to it.
Thanks, man. So I'll ping you when this comes out, and if you like it and you wanna promote it, then that's cool.
Yeah, and definitely. We'll put something up on the webpage, no doubt.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
And it's been a real pleasure, guys. Chris, Michelle,
it was awesome.
Neil, thank you very much for adding me on at the end.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, Neil.
We'll talk to you later, man.
Sure. Yep. Take it
Thanks,
easy.
Neil.
Yep, bye.
So, let's do our...
Can I throw up now?
Dave, we just got done talking to Clutch. We just got done...
I know, but it just seemed like a good time. It
doesn't. Oh, now that is awesome.
Tribute.
Just from a personal note, obviously it doesn't matter what I think. Okay, Dave.
Yeah.
On
a personal note, I love that guy.
Oh, he's awesome.
I just love that guy. Just talking.
That's amazing. 1,000 people that I've ever heard. I mean, he is so just wow.
I just love talking to him. It was just a fun podcast, you know. I mean, it was like sitting there chatting with one of your buddies.
I can't wait to hear the whole thing. I mean, I literally cannot wait. It's got to be phenomenal.
Yeah, it was great. He was really easygoing, and I really liked. I mean, for me, from the social engineering side. I think we spent a lot of time on the lyrics, which there was no deep, super. I mean, there's a lot of depth to his lyrics. You know, they're from books that he reads and things that are going on. I mean, the Animal Farm thing was just epic.
But isn't that impressive, though? That people as fans can look at a song or analyze a song so much, but it just rolls out of his cerebral cortex and ends up, a song.
Yeah, you want to hear this, dude? Burning Beard. He wrote it in 15 minutes. and Animal Farm is about a 1962 Twilight Zone episode called To Serve Man, where aliens come to Earth and they have this book called To Serve Man, and they're taking people from Earth to space, and everyone thinks that they're there to serve, and then they find out To Serve Man is a cookbook.
Oh, man, tastes just like chicken.
Yeah. But it's just there's not like a lot of it wasn't that he was trying to teach us a lesson with the lyrics. So to me, for the social engineering side, I really was fascinated with this whole the smell sense, getting him ready for a show. That's something I haven't heard before. And then Michelle, what you brought out about that being linked to the memory, I wonder if there's a link there. I wonder if there's a link. What's the smell of a pen test? Can you?
I totally agree with that. I mean, there's smells that I'll get a whiff of that will take me back to my childhood. I mean, there's such a connection between memory and smell.
Yeah, the olfactory bulb's connected. It's part of the limbic system, and so if you think about crayons, or if you think about the smell of fried chicken, it will probably, if you have a previous association that's really strong, it's going to bring up a really strong memory. And that's what's interesting about your sense of smell.
But I wonder if there's a way to, like when you're successful, let's say you do a pen test and you're super successful and it's 100%. And then I wonder if there's a way to create that link, like to have a smell that you then take and say, oh, that's bubble gum. This is my success bubble gum. And every time you succeed at a pen test, you chew a stick of this, and that smell now becomes the smell of success to your brain. So before a pen test, if you were to slap a stick of that gum in your mouth, it would automatically create a connection to success. I'm just wondering if there's a way to do that, to like social engineer yourself into always feeling successful. Kind of like what Lily said last month about standing a certain way makes her feel confident. I wonder if there's a way to trick yourself into using the same methodology that Neil had into creating success. What do you think?
Well, all of it is conditioning, and it's something that's fairly well known in psychology. And you see athletes do it. Even athletes will wear certain pairs of socks or do pregame rituals. And all of it, it's superstitious behavior as an aspect of learning and conditioning.
And you guys wonder why I play Bruce Hornsby every single thing. It's superstition.
But that's not linked to success. That actually is a good point. That's a good point.
Listen.
No, Dave.
It is linked to success. The podcast has done well, and every single episode that I've been on, we play Bruce horns, and we get great feedback.
So hang on. I have a question for Michelle as the resident shrink in the podcast. So, if that's the case, Michelle, let's say you have like you said, you have these sports people who wear socks, or like Neil, he wears a certain shirt with the smell. And let's say you do condition yourself. This bubble gum is my success gum. Every time I smell it, I'm successful. And then after you've conditioned yourself with a few episodes, and now you take the gum before success to create that link in your mind that you're going to be successful, and you fail, will you have created a new reality? Will you have broken that link?
A lot of it depends on how strong the original association is. It's basically classical conditioning is Pavlov's dogs. Remember, they used to. Originally, yep. he didn't intend to set up that relationship at all, but it happened accidentally.
Yep.
And if it's associated with really sort of something fundamental like food behavior, it can be really hard to break that association. So one incident is probably not going to be enough. One fail is probably not going to be enough to break that association if the original relationship is really strong.
So it would have to be a timing thing, I would imagine. Like, it couldn't be, we go out of the pen test, we succeed, we get in through the gates, we do our job. There has to be a point where the oxytocin, the serotonin, all the good chemicals, the dopamine are flowing at its highest peak, and that's when you introduce this odor that creates that psychological link.
Yep, timing is important.
So figuring that out, that can be like a really interesting area of research for social engineers.
Yeah, how would you control that?
I'm not sure. Yeah. I don't know. It's like I don't know. I mean, it would have to be through trial and error. Having a pen test, going out, getting in through the gates, and then introducing that odor at different times to say this is when I feel the best.
Yeah. I just smell my Pony Express every time I start an NSE engagement, so it's tattooed on my brain. So
really, really good. Really.
Every time I smell rotting cheese, I think of Chris, but I don't know why.
Well, that's not success, though.
Me too.
That's not success. That was that's terrible. That's
your cologne.
Yeah. Yeah, what happened to you being nice to me before the podcast, Dave?
Oh, sorry. I'll go back to being nice.
Thanks. I like that better. It made me feel good. Now you ruined my psychological link to my good gum smell here.
That's what I'm going for, man.
Yeah, thanks. Anyhow, that's a great podcast. I think this is kind of brings us to our conclusion. So let me just say a couple things real quick. You could check our training out on the social-engineer.com site, the training link. We have our 5-day course up there, the four sessions that we already talked about before the podcast. Also, the mastermind group. We got a lot of interest in that lately. The present group we have is just about full. There's only a couple slots left. You can check out what that is and how to get involved in that on the site, also the social-engineer.com site. Of course, don't forget social-engineer.org, where the framework is, where this podcast lives, the newsletter, many other resources linked to teaching you about what social engineering is and how to defend against the malicious forms of it and how to use it in your everyday life. Another great podcast with the Clutch guys, Neil there, so check out their site at pro-rock.com. And thanks again for the outro music, which you're listening to just about now. If you like IRC, you can check us out at irc.freenode.net on channel social-engineer. Twitter, we're Human Hacker, and corporate Twitter is SOC Engineer Inc. I think that's about it. Did I miss anything, Michelle?
Number 49.
That's it.
That's about it.
Hey, thanks again, guys.
Thanks, guys.
My heart is gone. I'm gone cold. My heart is gone. I'm gone cold. swan boats, and daisy chains. Can't seem to recall any given name. I see the footprints, how they come, how they go. Was that only a moment, or many years ago? My heart is gone.